Chapter 8. 80 Squirrels, 1 Heron. It was Mr. Ferriby's habit, in the early evening, to go up to the top of his garden where he had his shed. One of his many interests was making mobiles out of card and string. His creations were beautiful, and he had recently started selling them online to customers around the world. Early that evening, as Suzanne and Aubrey teased Jim about his squirrel, and Jim assembled ham and cheese omelettes, Mr. Ferriby sat down in his shed and picked up his latest design. It was 3 elephants made of coloured card. He almost had the balance right. Balance is everything in mobiles. Anne was looking forward to sending it to a lady in Norway who wanted it for her new granddaughter. Mr. Ferriby was smiling to himself when he just happened to glance out of the window of his shed towards Aubrey's house. The smile stayed fixed on his face in a foolish way as Mr. Ferriby forgot all about it. He decided he must be going bonkers right there and then. In his shed, with his mobile in his hands, he must be as nutty as Bombay mix and as loopy as a fruit hoop. He must be hallucinating, because what his eyes were telling his brain they could see could not possibly be happening. Squirrels! So many! How many? Something like 80 squirrels were skittling through the gardens towards Aubrey's house. The ground teemed with a flooding tide of squirrels, which broke against the walls and flowed up them in a snaky wave. A dozen squirrels vanished into the bathroom where the first had come out. 2 dozen more flung themselves into Aubrey's room through his window. Platoons of squirrels plunged down the chimney. Mr. Ferriby's smile dropped off his face, bounced on his workbench and rolled under his chair. Quick, he must save his neighbours from massive squirrel attack. How do you fight 80 squirrels? Mr. Ferriby stared wildly around his shed, picked up a trowel and charged heroically towards violent death at the claws and teeth, small but oh so sharp, of multitudes of rabid squirrels. He had almost made it to the battleground. He had to descend his own garden and climb over the low dividing wall, which took him a minute or two, because Mr. Ferriby was not equipped with squirrel speed. When there was a huge scrabble of tiny feet and 80 squirrels hurled themselves out of Aubrey's house. They fired out of the windows like bushy-tailed bullets. They shot out of the chimney like quick brown fireworks. They cascaded down the walls, leaping and scrabbling in their dozens. Some even used Mr. Ferriby as a jumping-off point, landing on his head and shoulders and springing gaily away. Mr. Ferriby only heard squeaks and chitters, but he had the strangest notion that some of these squirrels were grinning. Now he steeled himself for the horrors he knew must await. He pictured Aubrey, Jim and Suzanne in a heap on the floor, torn to pieces, scattered round the kitchen and living room, their heads gnawed like nuts. He could not bear to imagine the scenes of blood and gore. He pulled open the back door, trowel raised, prepared to duel with any killer squirrel which still feasted on the corpses of his neighbours. "Hello, Mr. Ferriby." Suzanne looked surprised but pleased to see him, as she always was. "Doing some gardening?" "Squirrels?" Mr. Ferriby managed, after a short pause. "You too," Jim cried. "See, I told you. I had one in the bathroom earlier. Where was yours?" "Oh, there were 1 or 2. Anyway, sorry. Thought I saw something. So, all right?" Mr. Ferriby stammered. He looked at Aubrey. Aubrey gave him a slightly shy smile. "Fine, fine," said Jim, who was visibly better than he had been for a while. "It was using my toothbrush. Do squirrels get gum disease?" "Not as far as I know," Mr. Ferriby said, sounding a bit more like himself. "Mr. Ferriby, would you like to come in?" Suzanne asked. "Would you like a cup of tea or a glass of something?" Mr. Ferriby thanked her, made his excuses and returned to his shed. He decided not to mention the episode to Mrs. Ferriby. He was fairly sure he was not going mad. He did not believe he had been hallucinating, which meant he really had seen 80 squirrels invade his neighbour's house for 2 or 3 minutes and then leave. But why, he asked himself. Why? Footnote. The combined gnawing power of 80 squirrels multiplied by 3 minutes is simply staggering. They could turn 3 wardrobes into 1 box of matches if the mood took them. Lightening Jim's life was no challenge at all. Marcel saw the answer in action the next morning. Suzanne had told Jim and Aubrey to look after each other and gone off to work. Aubrey declared he would be in the attic doing his half-term math project. Jim had an appointment with his doctor. The fly watched Jim climb out of bed, have a bath and do his teeth. Marcel watched him dress, eat breakfast, put on his shoes and coat. Everything Jim did seemed charged with a new power. Marcel rubbed his legs together as he saw Jim's expression change repeatedly from puzzlement to satisfaction. Everything Jim did made him feel strong. His slippers, the book he read in the bath, his toothbrush, his shoes, coat, phone and wallet all felt light. At the touch of his hand, the objects of the world seemed to spring to obey him. "My strength is coming back," Jim exclaimed. "Could I really be getting better?" Jim and Aubrey talked about how long Jim would be gone for, reminded themselves of what Aubrey was and was not allowed to do when home alone. No fires, bombs or electrical stunts, common sense, and Jim set off down the lane with half a spring in his step. He even managed to take in some of the still beauty of the quiet autumn day. Jim had not been gone long when the surprising events at Woodside Terrace began again. From his vantage point in the shed, Mr. Ferriby made the following observations. 10:08, Jim leaves. 10:17, Aubrey in garden. 10:32, heron lands in garden. Aubrey approaches. It does not fly off. Are they talking? 10:38, heron flies off. Aubrey goes inside. 11:04, Aubrey in garden, heron. Fish. What a terrible thing it is to lose one's reason, to be the victim of visions too strange to credit, hallucinations too extraordinary to relate. I must tell. Wow. 12:30, Jim back. And now look at them. Aubrey hammer, Jim pond. Of course, lunch. If you have the luck to become acquainted with a grey heron, you will know what wry, dry birds they are, for all that they spend so much time with their feet in the water. And of course they are very big and angular, and their beaks are as sharp as Roman short swords. The heron's landing in the garden, the swoop and swish of it, the bounce, break, flap, and the great bird suddenly towering over him would have made Aubrey jump a few days ago. But what a few days they had been. "Hello," Aubrey cried, grinning up at the heron's ring-gold eye. "Welcome to Woodside Terrace." "Call me Ardea," said the heron in a rather laconic way. "Good of you to invite me." "Oh, I didn't. It's all Athena Noctua." "I know," said the heron. You could see he was amused. Why would anyone invite a lanky, shunky big-nose into their garden on their own initiative? "But I didn't mean that at all," Aubrey said. "I know," said the heron, trying hard not to show his enjoyment. "Sarcasm. Lowest form of wit before you come to slapstick, which I happen to rather like. Do you know the difference between a banana and a missing manhole cover?" Then I'm not coming to yours for pudding." "I hear you are in want of a fish." It was Aubrey's turn to stop himself laughing. "Yes," he said seriously. "Dad needs to eat fresh fish. They don't sell any in town. It's all frozen." "Type of fish?" squawked the heron. "Species of fish? Size of fish? Gender of fish? You do know there is more to fish than fresh, frozen and shell, right?" "Sarcasm," Aubrey retorted. "Highest form of humour for low-witted wading birds." "Hey, I like that," the heron said, sounding impressed. "You wouldn't write that down for me and sign it?" Aubrey ignored this. "We need oily fish." "Oily it will be," said the heron. "Try not to get too bored without me. I will be 26 minutes precisely. Clear the runway, clear!" The bird sprang into the air, wings beating tremendously, lifted over the terrace roofs and climbed away, long legs sticking out behind him. 26 minutes later, to Mr. Ferriby's astonishment and Aubrey's admiration, Ardea the heron landed in the garden again. "How could you be so precise?" Aubrey wanted to know. The heron had its head tipped back. He said, "Gawk!" "Gawk?" Aubrey repeated. "Have you run out of words?" "Gank!" coughed the heron, and its eyes flamed a ferocious gold. "I don't think I've come across that one either. Could you write it down for me and sign it?" The heron narrowed its eye, took 4 quick steps, threw its long neck out over the pond, opened its beak and heaved up a stunning silver-green fish, over a foot long and vigorously alive. The fish fell into the pond with a splosh and immediately began swimming around in fast circles. The pond was barely bigger than a bird bath. The fish looked like a whale shark in there. Fish times one, said the heron with dignity. Trout, rainbow, male, oily. Delicious however you cook it, even better raw. Liberated from the Beck Fish Farm, 12 minutes flying time from here in these conditions. Does that conclude our business? Sorry, our dear. Ha ha, gank. You've got to admit it was quite funny. Fair point, the heron nodded. It was. So, are you going to be okay with killing this fish, or would you prefer to look away while I do it? Oh, I don't know. You just whack it on the head, do you? That works, the heron agreed. Get a good grip, which is as hard as it looks, and bash it on a rock. And don't let it talk you out of eating it. We all have to live. Stuff eats stuff, way of the world. Don't let any fish whaling soften your heart. Fish whaling? Yes, the usual. My poor fish kids, they need me, have mercy. My fishwife, how will she survive? Oh, oh, to think I'll never see her again. Please don't kill me, I beg you. That kind of thing. On and on. Don't listen. Take him by the tail and whack. I don't know if I can do it now, poor fish. Well, don't blame you. Can't stand it myself. It's one of the reasons we like to swallow them as quickly as possible. Spear, swallow. That's it for me. And for them. Why don't you let your father do it? He won't hear a thing. I suppose he might do it. Your mother's a straight-talking sort of bird, isn't she? She'd do it, wouldn't she? Right, said Aubrey, making a sudden decision. I'll do it. It's okay to kill things if you're going to eat them, isn't it? I don't know about okay, said the heron. Vegetarians would disagree. But a top predator like me doesn't get that menu. I find killing fish rather beats starving to death. Different for you, of course. You have to make a moral choice. Ardea left. Jim returned. Aubrey showed him the new occupant of the pond. Oh, Aubrey, where did you get that? Jim demanded dizzily. A heron dropped it, Aubrey said. It's a rainbow trout. It is, and so beautiful. Yes, Aubrey agreed with a pang of conscience, but won't it taste delicious? Said Jim. It would. With some new potatoes and lightly fried courgettes, it would be scrumptious. Shall we catch it, Dad? Well, yes, I guess. Jim looked worried now. I'll have to kill it, you realise. I'll try to make sure it doesn't suffer, but I think you'd better not watch. Sure, Aubrey said, humbly grateful. I'll get you the hammer. And off he zipped, followed by a surprised look from his father, who was not to know that Aubrey had thought this fish death through. Aubrey returned with the tool. It was a lumpen, heavy and serious hammer. You could put an elephant down with it if you tapped him in the right place. Jim had been staring at the trout. Now he turned to his son and swallowed. Oh dear, Aubrey thought. I can't do it, Jim said. It's too beautiful. We should put it in a bucket of water and take it down to the beck. But, Dad, don't you need to eat oily fish? I think I'm supposed to, yes, but I don't want to kill it, the poor thing. But you do eat meat and fish. I do, but it's different when you... No problem, Aubrey said briskly. I've got this. Before he had time to change his mind, before Jim had time to say anything, and crucially, before the fish had time to protest, Aubrey lunged forward, grabbed the trout, hoiked it out, and dealt it a solid whack with the hammer. The trout did not even have time to think about anything, at least not out loud. Aubrey thought he might have heard it say, "Oi!" but that was that. He gave it another whack just to be sure and looked up at his father. Jim seemed impressed. Well, he said, let's call your mum and tell her to pick up some courgettes. We're really going to eat.